Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to be successful with a workplace chatbot. Thanks for joining in today. My name is Siobhan Fagan, and I am the managing editor over at CMSwire. Right now, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We are in the midst of our introductions. That will take about 5 minutes, and then the main event. We will have a presentation from two great presenters that will take about 35 to 40 minutes. And following that, we would love to do a Q&A with you, our audience. So please use the Q&A module at the bottom left of your browser to enter any questions for our presenters at any time during the presentation. And you'll also find some colorful widgets that have additional resources, especially if you need any technical support with the webinar. A little bit about CMSwire. It was founded in 2003, and it publishes on topics daily: digital customer experience, digital workplace, and information management. We also have webinars like this and tweet jams on a monthly basis, so we hope that you stop by. A little bit about today's sponsor, Workgrid. Workgrid software is changing the way enterprise software is built. Their mission is to create beautiful, purpose-built software that focuses on improving the employee experience, and you can find out more at the website at the bottom of the slide. Again, I'm Siobhan Fagan. I'm happy to be here today. And presenting, we will have Sam Marshall. He is the owner of ClearBox Consulting, and Jillian McCann. She is the head of cloud engineering and AI at Workgrid Software. At this point, I'll say take it away, Sam.
Thank you very much, Siobhan, and I'm really pleased to be on this webinar with Workgrid. So my name is Sam Marshall. I'm based in the UK. I'm the owner and lead consultant of ClearBox Consulting, and we focus particularly on the people side of digital workplaces, working for organizations from small charities through to multinationals. I also have a bit of an AI background, so I studied AI many years ago and worked on industrial AI things like decision-making for insurance underwriting, and back when AI was really simple, we just did basic things like controlling nuclear submarines, but it's moved on a lot now. I'm pleased to be joined by Jillian. Hello, Jillian.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Delia McKay, and I'm Head of Cloud Engineering and Artificial Intelligence at Workgrid Software. At Workgrid, we focus on building intelligent workplace products. And in the last few years, I have spent a lot of time exploring how conversational AI, chatbots, and voice assistants can really improve the employee experience and provide productivity gains across corporations. Prior to that, I've worked as a cloud architect and have over 19 years experience building enterprise systems in whatever tech you can think of. I probably have done it. I'm just going to hand over to Siobhan. Looks like our first poll question is in.
Yes, before we get started on the main event, we actually would love to just get a sense of where you are, the audience, with chatbots. So you can answer the question directly on your screen. Our question is, what's your experience of workplace chatbots so far? And select one. Your options are, I've experimented as a user, I use them regularly, I've built a test chatbot, I've built a chatbot that's used regularly, I'm planning or considering building a chatbot. And you can, again, just click right on the screen and then click submit, and we'll find out where you are. Jillian, what do you sense is going on in workplaces right now with chatbots? Do you think that a lot of businesses are in the exploratory phase, or have you seen a lot of businesses fully implementing them?
I think we definitely have seen a lot of increase in interest in chatbots. I've been building them in the workplace for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's really moving from, out of the hype cycle into really quite expert chatbots in particular domains. I think businesses are really seeing the value in how they can improve employee experience. And, just to be able to give experiences that answer employees' questions quickly, provide quick ways to do common tasks, and just seeing gradually more and more investment in this space and interest in how can you, use conversational interfaces to really help your employees in their daily work.
Mm-hmm. It seems like we've really come so far in the last few years, but we've got our results here. So very interesting. The majority of our audience is planning or considering building a chatbot. So that pretty much lines up with what you were saying, Jillian.
Yes, definitely see a evolution. The technology is improving, user experience is improving, and I think we really see a lot of value add in the next few years.
Excellent. So let's learn more about chatbots. At this point, I'm going to hand it off to Sam.
Thank you very much again, Siobhan. So I'm going to kick off by talking about when to use a chatbot and some of the critical success factors for it. So as I see it, the role of our digital workplace as a whole, not just chatbots, but our whole digital workplace, should be to help employees focus on the important tasks and reduce the burden of trivial tasks. It's almost like if you make the simple things hard, then employees don't have the brain space left to actually do the genuinely hard tasks. And chatbots can be a great way then of helping with things that are maybe routine or things that are fiddly and time consuming, because unlike maybe doing it through traditional workflow, they can understand a little bit more what it is that you're actually trying to get at, the intent, and the best chatbots can also anticipate what it is that you need, so they're always kind of a step ahead of you. If we look at the ways in which chatbots are used, I think the simplest ones are basically as a more natural language search interface, so a very basic retrieval engine. But actually, even in that role, it's not all bad, because what we see is that people tend to write longer queries into the chatbot, versus if you go to a search engine, normal practice is that people only write 1 or 2 words, and therefore it can be very hard to disambiguate what the search intent really is. But going further, chatbots are great when it comes to multi-stage search refinement. So you might, if you look at the example on the right, type to the chatbot, show me profit margins for mobile phones, and it comes back with a nice set of data. And then you say, which are Samsung models less than 6 months old? Now, although that looks quite simple, there's actually something quite sophisticated going on there, because what you're saying is, from that set of data, refine it and drill it down. I'm guessing, given how many people responding to the poll said that they were thinking of working on chatbots themselves, are not very impressed with that, because you're probably in that elite 1% of digital literacy that gets what search is all about and knows how to use search terms. You've got to remember that your average user, your average employee, is probably way less sophisticated than that. And the third real potential for chatbots is as a transaction interface. And this is the thing when the value really starts to come to life. So, we see a lot of chatbots around HR transactions, because often it's the HR help desk that's quite expensive to run. We see it around meeting and scheduling, because it's one of those fiddly tasks that everybody resents the time it takes just finding gaps in diaries and finding a meeting room when everyone has a gap in their diary and so on. Expenses, any kind of form filling, any sort of routine process. But also, as is the example from Microsoft Teams, Whobot on the right, just doing things like finding people can be very helpful. One of the ways that I sometimes think about chatbots is that if you think about a work task that you could offshore, chatbots are like offshoring not to another country but to the digital domain, to the world of AI instead. So what I've been thinking about over the last couple of years are, if we look at the experimentation that's happening with chatbots, what are the underpinning factors for success? And I think there are 6 things that you need to get right for chatbots to succeed. And I'm going to go through them, but these are basically, it should be available, maintainable, transactional, universal, provides answers, and understands true conversations. So let's go through those, starting with available. So look, the real origin of chatbots, the reason why we're seeing a lot of them now is the growth in messaging apps, in the consumer space, things like Facebook Messenger, or in China, things like WeChat. And it works because you've already got that app open. So you can think of it as a breakout task. You might be having a conversation with someone, and then you say, oh, God, yeah, let's see if that room's available at a certain time, or let's see how much that flight would be. And what you don't want to do is go out of that task entirely into a different interface. What you want to be able to do is answer that task by staying where you are. And that's where the chatbot comes in by saying, okay, I can pick up that query from within the messaging app that you already have open. The next one is that it should be maintainable. So one of the things where traditional intranets went a bit wonky is when they were too technical for people to update themselves. And if, for example, someone had asked IT to put together a page of answers about, say, HR policy, and the only people that could then make changes to the page was another IT expert, we found that information tended to get out of date. It was too much work, or it got caught in a backlog, and people became disillusioned with the information because they knew it was out of date, and therefore they would go back to picking up the phone and asking someone, and even if they gave them the wrong answer, it was more believable because a person had told you. So we need to make sure we don't fall into that trap again with chatbots by having a chatbot tool where whoever owns the information is also able to go in there and make sure that it's up to date. Now, again, in the simplest form, this might just be about saying, if you get this question, then give them this answer. But we need to be mindful that a really helpful chatbot is going to involve a little bit more decision making. So, if you look at the decision tree on the right, when can I retire, it may be that the answer isn't as straightforward when you're 65. It may depend on gender, and then it may depend on age. Certainly in the UK, our government keeps pushing away the retirement date, so it's always just about in reach, but never quite, it feels. And also, when it comes to maintenance, you need to make sure that it understands your corporate language. So this is why generic chatbots are never really going to be that successful, because one part of the organization might say holiday, another might say vacation, another might say leave, and all of this is going to affect the sense that the chatbot really understands what you're looking for. The third one is that the chatbot needs to be transactional. So if all your chatbot does is act as a search interface, that's kind of useful. I don't want to dismiss it entirely. Sometimes, for example, in a chat interface, someone might type a question to disturb all their colleagues, and the chatbot can jump in and say, yeah, don't worry, everybody, I'll handle this, and bring back the answer. But really, if we go back to that purpose of digital workplaces about taking away the trivial tasks off the shoulders of employees, it's much better if the chatbot can deal with transactions. And that might involve, for example, stepping people through the process, as wizards used to do. But the real value comes when the chatbot can do a little bit more anticipation. So if you say, yeah, I want to book a meeting room, it says boardroom 2 is free at 3 p.m., would you want to book it? And you say yes, then the bot not only books the boardroom, but it also adds it to your calendar, and it informs the other participants, and it might even come back and say, do you need catering with this, or do you need any AV equipment with it, and so on. I think, again, it's fair to say, though, given the current sophistication of chatbots, there's probably a point where actually taking people to a full form isn't necessarily wrong. And the reason I say that is that the to and fro dialogue nature of chatbots means that it isn't always obvious how long the process is or how many options there might be. Whereas with a form that fills the screen, you can quickly scan through all the questions and be reassured about how long it's going to take, or even it might say you're on page 2 out of 4, and get a better sense of what the overall process is from that. So transactions that are relatively simple, or ones that are familiar so people know all the steps, are going to work well with the chatbot. My fourth success factor is that it should be universal. So I guess like many people, I've got an Alexa, and I'm very fond of Alexa. But one of the challenges is that when you add skills to Alexa so it interfaces with other systems, for it to work well, you've got to tell Alexa what other skill it's going to use. So I can't say, Alexa, set the heating to 20 degrees. I have to say, Alexa, tell Hive to turn the heating to 20 degrees. Or if I want to know about train times, I have to say, Alexa, ask National Rail, when's the next train to London? And that, in a way, is pushing the burden back onto me to remember all the different skills, all the different sub-bots that are going to fulfill the query. That seems a bit daft to me. Again, using the internet analogy, there was a time when whoever owned the information would publish it in their department page. And what it did was make employees do a little runaround to say, if I want a new laptop, so is that the IT department because it's technology, or is it procurement because they're buying a laptop, or is it finance because they're expensive? And you'd hop from page to page, desperately looking for the right form within the department. Probably was hidden because laptops are expensive and it's a cost control measure. So we shouldn't, with chatbots, make our employees go through that same kind of second guessing. What we want is for the kind of lead bot to be a concierge that says, for this kind of request, I'm going to pass it on to an expense bot behind the scenes, or maybe I need to talk to the diary bot first to find when people are available, and then for the second stage, talk to the facilities bot to book the meeting room. The reason I highlight this is because when I talk to a lot of companies that are experimenting with bots, they talk about, say, the IT bot that's going to answer queries about Microsoft Windows, and HR somewhere else are doing their own bot that's going to answer things about pay and pensions. And at the moment, it's probably fine because people will not have very high expectations of the bots. But you'll reach a point where there will be overlap in that laptop procurement, expenses, facilities kind of scenario. And then you might get bots bottling, or even bots battling. That's hard to say, so best avoided. But also it points to the need for a joined-up strategy to say, okay, really what we're providing is a whole bunch of intelligence services. What's the point that brings them together so that there is a single interface across them all? And really what you want also is a bot that will let you make the same request in multiple ways. So turn the heating down, make it colder, turn the heating up, all of those without knowing what system's going to provide it. This is an issue with chatbots because in a way they're like MS-DOS on steroids. When all you see is the little "Hello, I'm your bot" prompt, it's like the MS-DOS C prompt. There's nothing that tells you what it can do. So in DOS we used to have to type help, and then it'd come up with a great big black screen full of text. What changed when we went over to graphical interfaces, like you can see on the right, is that the interface told you what the options were. Usability people call this affordance. The device makes it plain what the options are. So I'm editing this smiley face image. When I go to wrap text, it says you can have square, tight, through, top, bottom, behind, in front, and so on. It makes it very clear what those options are. Without that, what I have to do is remember what the options are. And that is a strong kind of a heavy cognitive load back on the user. Again, picking on Alexa, one of the infuriating things as the complexity of my bot world increases is that now I have both lights that are in a group called Lounge, and I have a security camera, which is called Lounge because that's the room that it's in. So when I say Alexa, lounge lights off, sometimes Alexa directs that to the security camera, and the camera says, you can't turn me off because that's a security risk. And sadly, there's no way for me to remonstrate with Alexa until she gets it right. I just have to stay patient and keep repeating it. So sometimes what you see in bots is that they are trying to do that MS-DOS help thing back to the Who bot in Teams. I can go into the Teams Who bot, and it will prompt me with that screenshot that you see on the right saying, these are the things that I can do. And it's smart enough to pop that up the first time I go in there. I don't have to say, hello, WhoBot, what can you do? But in a way, this list of what you can do is a bit misleading because WhoBot is much more versatile than the list of things you see on the right. So if I want to know someone's job role, I can say, who is Fiona, or what does Fiona do, or what's Fiona's job, or what's Fiona's role, and all of those work. So again, that universal principle, the bot is built so that we can talk to it in a whole range of flexible ways without being very strict about the syntax. And to me, that's a really encouraging thing to move on from the limitations of things like MS-DOS. Success factor number 5 is about having answers, not links. So those of you that are old enough, cast your mind back to the days before Google. What did you use for your search engine? Maybe you remember Alta Vista or Excite, or you would go to Yahoo and click through the directory, which was always kind of manually maintained taxonomy of sites. But what these search engines had in common was that when you got the search results, it was basically a bunch of links. It wasn't actually the answer. Google changed all that. When you go to Google and say, how do I get from Oxford to London, it gives you the actual answer. It shows you a map. It gives you driving directions or even walking directions. It'll tell you about local transport and say, if you want to get trains, these are the connections, and this is the time of the next train. Most enterprise search, it's not there yet. If I go into your average intranet and say paternity leave, it will give me a PDF. That's the equivalent of going to Google and saying, how do I get from Oxford to London? And Google saying, here's a train timetable, you look it up, Sam. So what we should aspire to with our chatbots is that it actually understands if I'm asking about something like paternity leave, I probably want information, but there's also a structured intent behind it. So in the ideal world, if I say to my chatbot, what's my paternity leave entitlement, it will say, for you personally, Sam, it's 10 days. As you're asking about paternity leave, maybe you want to know that you've got 6 days holiday remaining, and perhaps you actually want to go ahead and apply for paternity leave. Well, click here and I'll take you through the process. Or maybe you just want to see what the details are. Here's the employee handbook, and I'll just give you that little section from the handbook. Or if you still got questions and you want to talk to a person, then your rep is Joe Malone, and you can email her, phone her, or messenger from within this interface. One thing to say here is that sometimes people see chatbots as a solution to enterprise search not working, and I think it's the other way around. If your enterprise or intranet search is poor, a bot is just a search engine on top at that point. It's unlikely to fix it. And in particular, if what's happening is that when someone searches for something like paternity leave, they are sent to a 100-page PDF of the employee handbook, your bot isn't going to be able to break that down into an answer that will fit on a mobile phone. So think about that workflow, because if what the bot brings back is just a link to a PDF, somebody who started off in a chat interface is now going to have to click on the PDF link, go into a PDF viewer, and then search within the PDF. The whole kind of neatness of it breaks down. And the last success factor is to have true conversations. So this is where the natural language element of bots really comes to the fore, because in normal conversations we have quite a few vague references. It's called anaphora. So if the bot says, oh, you asked about meeting rooms, well, at 10 a.m. we've got boardroom, creativity, and closet available, and the response is book the first one, the first one is the anaphora. It's saying boardroom. What you don't want to do is have to type precisely boardroom, because if you get typos and then it says, I don't understand what boardroom is, do you want boardroom, creativity, or closet? Then it's going to be enormously frustrating. Do bear in mind, though, that the current state of the art is that backtracking can be pretty hard. So if you're dealing like on the phone with a real agent, and the agent said, I booked the boardroom for 10 a.m. on Wednesday, shall I add it to your calendar? you might at that point say, oh, actually, no, I've changed my mind. What's free on Tuesday instead? It's really hard for a bot to pick up from that kind of fail and say anything other than, sorry, I don't understand, because it might understand Tuesday has been a calendar query, but not as a single step back on the room booking. The other thing to say about true conversations is that because the strong use case is a chat interface, that tends to be driven more by mobile phones. We're more likely to do typos on smartphones through touch screens because we're doing it with thumbs, and maybe doing it while we're walking down the street and dodging lampposts. But also that, again, we need to be clear about language in our company and things like acronyms. It's unlikely that if you buy an off-the-shelf bot, it has that built in. So if you talk about MTBF or PMO, or you've got a site in Parsippany, you've got to take time to put that in there. Also, there might be regional things where something like an Irish name, Omani, doesn't sound anything like it's spelled. So if someone says, oh, call Pat Omani, and they try and do that with the bot, it's got to be really flexible in terms of that phoneme to grapheme translation to get it right. So just to sum up the points I've made, the triggers for saying, yes, a chatbot is the right thing to do, it's when you can already serve users in the context of the apps that they have open. Particularly, it works well when screen space is limited because the chat dialogue works well compared to, for example, a big form. Think about places where you've got a form already and the bot makes it simpler to navigate through it, and that is a good candidate for it. Think, too, about where at the moment people are having to hop back and forth between different systems, and the bot can do some stitching together by applying that universal principle. And make sure that you already have corporate information that's well structured so that if the bot's doing search on top, it can present the answers in a meaningful and accessible way. So hopefully you've got all those things in place, and now you're itching to get started with your chatbot planning, and I'm going to hand over to Gillian now to take us through that.
Thanks, Sam. You've covered some great factors to think about when implementing a chatbot. I'm going to take a slightly different angle now and talk about some of the practical guidelines and technical things to consider when implementing a workplace chatbot. So what is a good workplace chatbot? To take it very simply, the goal is to answer employees' questions in the most accurate and quick way and perform common tasks in a simple, natural interface. I'm going to cover various ideas and concepts that we have implemented over the last few years. So how do you discover value early, and how do you deliver success? Well, you really need to think about the use case you're trying to deliver. We've touched upon some of the things you could implement: talent, HR, or IT help desk queries, facilities management questions, enterprise search. But really, when you think about it, it's that concierge approach, because your employees need all those things. One thing to think about is really to understand the most difficult systems that they interact with and their pain points. And we have found taking a design thinking approach and looking at persona mapping to understand your employees really helps pinpoint where to start. And that leads into taking a layered approach. As I said, there's many different areas, but you don't have to do it all at once. So maybe look at the top 5 to 10 systems that your employees regularly engage with. Look at the internet searches. What queries are in the top 5 things people are calling HR about? And try to take that holistic view and involve employees in the process. A lot of ideas and conversations that are added to the chatbot can come from the employee themselves. It's the simple things that can delight. A very popular conversation with one of our customers is actually, what's for lunch? Because it's actually one of their top 10 internet searches. And after all, people need to eat. So really, to deliver value early is to understand the employee and their pain points. So once you have your use case, you're really now ready to focus on the user experience. You really need to start thinking about conversational design. And conversational design is different from how you would design a website. And we think about how people use messaging and chat, and they use them differently from how they would actually engage with a website. So in the context of a conversational interface, we think about voice. Humans actually talk to computers differently than the way they chat. And we find the design across different modalities really needs to be thought through. And one way to do that is to actually script it out. And by that we mean like one person who is designing the chatbot plays the role of the bot, and somebody else plays the role of the employee. And we actually have conversations in that way. And we really do need to understand that people do talk in different ways. And to tie it back to some of Sam's comments, you need to understand that there's cultural differences and different ways people ask for the same thing. And this can be just different across like office locations, countries, or different organizations may use different words to mean the same things. And all that needs to be considered and built into your conversation design. And also because conversations themselves are very fluent and people switch context a lot, you need to have conversational flows that allow your users to potentially go off topic, but then the conversation design brings them back to what they're trying to achieve. And one area that we've found really important is discoverability. So some of the points about discoverability need to be addressed within the conversations themselves. So you need to build in things like tell me what you can do, built-in help, so they can learn what's available within the chatbot. And it's important to sort of make that dynamic so as the chatbot grows, the help that comes with it also grows so the people are aware of what your chatbot can do. And in some use cases and in some capabilities, if you have an opt-out option, that's something else to consider. Like sometimes people do want to talk to the human. So there's many different platforms and channels and clients you can put a chatbot in, and each of those have different capabilities. A pure chat or voice interface may not always work. I mean, imagine a big long form that you would fill in on screen being converted into a conversation. It just doesn't work. So maybe your use case mightn't actually fit within a chatbot. But we've also seen leveraging some lightweight visual components like images and buttons can really help the conversation flow and really keep your user on track to what they're trying to achieve. And importantly, context is king. Context in a conversation is what makes it powerful. Without context, it's just meaningless words. So there are many different things that can impact the context, like the previous conversations that have been had, the office location, and all those can provide a different answer. So you want to be able to provide a personalized and contextual response to your employee. So I'm just going to show some videos to sort of illustrate some of those points. The video here is a use case of booking a meeting on a mobile. And as you can see, it's using different visual components. It's using structured buttons to help you walk through the different options. And it's also at the top of the screen there, you can see that different buttons to help you understand what the chatbot can do. I think, though, you have to understand that these capabilities are dependent on the channel that you put the chatbot in. So like a recommendation is always design for a pure conversational interface to make sure that it will work in those channels, but then layer on visual components if they're available. So this video is really sort of getting at that idea of a contextual response. So like within question and answers within WorkGrid, we have the capability to provide a mechanism for different answers to be added for different reasons. And some of these different answers could be for legal reason, it could be just simply down to office facilities, like a cafe versus no cafe answer. So essentially, you know, the answer that your employee gets, the aim is always to make it as contextual and as personalized to them. And this allows like content authors to add in the right answer for the particular use case. So, and this can be, you know, as I say, use case driven, role jobs, history, memory, all these different things are what makes it contextual. So just to reiterate, context is king and conversations without context are somewhat meaningless. Okay, so you've implemented a chatbot and your employees are now talking to it. This is now a really important piece as you need to think about is having conversational analytics in your chatbot so that you're able to understand what your employees are asking and how to improve the answers. And this is really the focus is to improve the experience for your employees. So you should be building in like feedback loops, like conversations. Was this helpful? Can you make any suggestions to, new features? And you use this analytics to really drive the performance of the chatbot and make sure that it's understanding. And you may discover new ways that people talk about systems or words that they use that you maybe had not thought about that can be then fed back into the chatbot itself. But also privacy is very important. So I believe your default position in using any analytical tool should be that it is anonymized logs that aren't linked to a specific person. Because really what you're trying to do is use your analytics to improve performance, not really track what a particular person is saying. So this is an area we need to talk about when you think about you've built with a chatbot, and I'm talking about natural language chatbots. When you're building or deploying an AI-based product within the enterprise, I think there is a need to have an understanding of the capacity of the technology. And it's really so that you can set user expectations. I mean, there has been a lot of hype around chatbots, but I think we're getting into a more measured approach. People are understanding the capabilities of AI in this space and the AI that is being used, and they do see the advantages. So my recommendation would be you don't have to become an expert, but I think understanding the area of AI that's being used, and in this case it's conversational AI, so concepts like natural language understanding and natural language processing. And the purpose of that is simply to understand the user's intent so that when people asking questions or trying to perform things, that's the AI that is, extracting information out from those words. But also you need to understand that AI is not magic. You need code in that if once we've understood the user's intent, to really deliver a great chatbot, you need then to be able to potentially integrate with multiple systems. The AI itself will never be able to, for example, if you're building a pizza bot, I mean, that's what it does. It books pizzas, buys pizzas. So no matter how many times you repeatedly ask it to tell you the weather, it never really will be able to tell you the weather because that bot has never been built to understand those types of words, but also it has never been able to, integrate potentially with the weather system. That needs code, and those code integrations, call fulfillments, need to be built in. So ultimately, we do need integrations with third-party systems to be able to perform those interactions or transactions that Sam has talked about.
So just to bring Sam back into the conversation, we're going to have a bit of a discussion across some of the points that we've raised and really, talk about the implications for chatbots within the digital workplace.
Thanks, Gillian. Yeah, so I love the idea of nagging your pizza chatbot to tell you about the weather. One of the things that comes up quite a lot, I guess, is about the content maintenance side. So often with like big digital workplace refreshes, what you see is great on day one, and then by about year two, it's all got a bit stale, and the person who set up the initial pages of the intranet or set up like a community in a social network have moved on. What do you think we should do to make sure that doesn't happen with bots?
I think putting the hands in the maintenance of it in the content author, the people or the domain owners who are the people who write the policies, who write the PDFs. I think that's definitely something that rather than developers, if that makes sense, because I've seen a lot of bots being built in its development teams, IT teams, and that's something we started with several years ago and moved then more into self-service capabilities for content authors to be able to manage that. And some of the conversations are potentially only change once a year, like office holidays or things, simple things. So, maybe the way to overcome it is to make the bot more proactive, and the bot can remind people that they need to update things. So I think it's just an evolving space, really.
I guess ideally you still want someone who's got a little bit of a logical way of thinking. I always notice in in some departments there'll be someone who's considered an Excel god because they've mastered things like macros and therefore can just take it that little bit further, and then everyone else can use it, but you just need someone who's perhaps a bit more of a power user. And it's probably the same with maintaining the bot, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's good to have like an overall owner of the bot strategy within a company, or a bot champion. Somebody who is to bring in the analytics, like who's reviewing the analytics, who's seeing what your employees are asking, who's the one that's suggesting new answers or new questions or new integrations that be built. So I do think it does need an owner, and I think it ties back into your concierge idea, because you do see a proliferation of bots in the same way.
Yes.
We've seen SharePoint sites, we've seen apps. So it's just that if that approach is to be made real as a universal thing, somebody needs to own that universal bot.
Yes, yeah. And in terms of reminding people about the bot, I mean, I think it works really well if the bot's kind of looking at the conversation and saying, I can help with that, and just jumping in there like the eager employee. Do you do things like make the bot pop up from the bottom of the screen in the same way that on some websites you see the invitation to go into a conversation with the service rep?
So within WorkGrid itself, the bot is one piece of an overall digital assistant. So we have notifications built in, and so that kind of capability is there. So we mix different techniques in with the chatbots. I think you have to be careful. Again, it's to do with the amount of notifications that we get from so many systems. Just to be careful, like when is the chatbot to be more proactive? When does it make sense?
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely something to be aware of, because I think that's something you just see all the systems you're getting all these notifications from. And that's what we're trying to, within WorkGrid, is provide that one place that everything then is available through it.
It's a delicate line, isn't it? It's almost like if your employee is too eager to volunteer, saying, I'll do it, yeah. What was it? Was it in Shrek? I think it was in Shrek where Donkey was always volunteering to do stuff. And about whether the bot's human or not, I can see we've got a lot of questions coming in, so maybe if we keep this one brief. I'm very much an advocate of saying, no, you should be explicit that this isn't a person, and manage some of those expectations around the hype.
Yes, I totally agree. I think people can be more forgiving of technology if it's more honest. In that, I would never pretend a chatbot to be human. And as you say, it's about that setting the expectations that I was talking about, that, the bot should deliver exactly what it says, but also I think part of it's the design of the experience as well, to make it something you want to talk to, not an arduous task.
Yeah. All right, great. So we'll hand back to Siobhan now. Thank you, Siobhan. I think we've got some questions coming in.
Yes, we do, and thank you to you, Sam, and to Jillian for that presentation. That was really informative, and I am excited to see what questions people are asked based on what you said. Actually, this is sort of related to the last question you were discussing, and I'm going to start with you, Sam, but I'd like to know what you have to say as well, Jillian. Should your bot have a personality?
I'm inclined to say not too much. So, within an organization, there will be a tone of voice. And if you're kind of a fun organization, you don't want necessarily a really stern bot. But there was a case recently of an agency that built a bot to manage parking spot assignment. And they thought their employees would start bullying the boss and forcing it to give them the best parking spot. So they deliberately gave it quite an assertive personality. The problem then was that people would say please and thank you and start using all these social niceties with the bot, in part because they knew that their colleagues would see how they were talking to it, and they didn't want to be judged as someone who was maybe too rude, even though everybody knew it was a bot. And there's the concept of emotional labor. I don't know if you come across that, so things like waitressing, where you're paid to be nice and smile even if you don't feel it. And what we don't want to do with AI is make things harder for humans by making them do emotional labor. Robots should be our slaves, no doubt about it.
Although there's not anything wrong about saying please or thank you.
There is to a point.
Save
it for humans where it matters.
I always say please and thank you to Alexa. So I think I do agree. I do think it is important to think about brand and personality and make sure that it does match with your corporate brand. You know, an exercise that we do within WorkGrid is like we have a set of, I think it's 20, 30 sort of personality traits. And we just say, you know, roughly, what do you think are the 5 most important things? And to be frank, within a corporate digital workplace, you know, it's the same common traits. It should be cheerful, friendly, it should be useful, it should be informational, and it should be knowledgeable. So, you know, the words that people suggested, when you think about it in the context of a digital workplace, they all made sense. But I do think, you know, if we're thinking more in the customer space as well, you would always have brand guidelines for websites. So I think brand guidelines for conversational interface is definitely something companies should be thinking about.
Yeah,
that absolutely makes sense. Yeah. So our next question is for you, Jillian, and this is from Gary. He's asking, who in financial services is using bots most effectively?
So I can't really talk about financial services in general, but I can give an example of Liberty Mutual Insurance, which is one of our customers. And they see a lot of benefits around the employee experience, a lot of those use cases across many different areas, but specific use cases like IT help desk, they've definitely looked at how they can reduce calls to the IT help desk. One particular use case that they have is about mobile device management and unlocking iPhones that people are given as a work phone. It's one of the top calls that they received, and they turned, I think it was a 10 to 15 minute phone call process into, I think, between 15-second to 2-minute conversation. And obviously that then frees up agents to work on more complex things. So they started, and go back that layered approach, they started with that one conversation within their enterprise digital assistant. And once they've seen the value of that one thing, they now have added a lot more than maybe 10, 15, 20 different IT help desk conversations that are available within that organization.
Interesting. That's an interesting case study. We've got another one for you, Jillian, and then I'm going to relay it over to you, Sam. So I'll keep you on the line for now, Jillian. Can a chatbot, given current technology, realistically answer detailed, tailored, personalized questions around critical information, such as detailed information around a hotel reservation or staff asking about leave entitlements, etc.?
So I think it depends. Like, let's take I'm just looking detailed information about a reservation. So the chatbot piece of the technology is to be able to model a conversation that will ask enough questions to get the relevant pieces of data that can be used to then perform a lookup against the hotel reservation system. So the chatbot itself, using natural language techniques, I have seen, like, there is hotel booking, there is hotel chatbot. So the chatbot interface will, if it's well designed, can do that. The piece then that has to be available, though, is an integration or an API or a way into those systems that actually have the answers. And that's sometimes where, kind of was touching on that a wee bit, AI is not magic. There is this fulfillment piece that in all the chatbot conversations is sometimes missed. If you can't actually integrate into those systems, then no matter what interface you put on it, you're never going to get into them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. Sam, did you have anything to add to that?
I think the good news is that things like hotel reservations and superannuation, these are normally very well structured pieces of data, so we know what the metadata is and we can tell what the values are. So as long as you've got the interface, I think it's relatively predictable in terms of what people might ask. and the skill of the chatbot is to understand that they might ask it in numerous ways. But the other thing we should remember is you need that kind of graceful exit. So you might say, can I transfer my pension fund from my previous employer, and have an answer to that? But when you say, can I transfer it from a previous employer that's based overseas, then the chatbot might need to say, I'm sorry, I need to pass you over to this person in HR to deal with that because it's beyond my knowledge. And that's fine. What you don't want is a chatbot continuously failing and frustrating if it can't answer it.
That's a great point. I think we've all experienced that in customer service side, at least, where we're just continuing to ask the same question and they never let you speak to the human. So the pass off is
it even happens when you're talking to the human, but they stick to the script.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got another question here. This one's from Thomas. And Sam, since you were the last to answer, I'll start with you, and then I'm going to hand it off to you as well, Jillian. The question is, do you sense that there's a resistance against AI among certain employees, for example, IT, legal, communications, HR, who are concerned their jobs may disappear as a consequence of the new technology? He's concerned about the change impact these corporations might face. So that's a nice, easy one for you, Sam. Any thoughts?
I do think that resistance is there. For any change, there is nothing unique to AI, but there's, as Gillian said, been so much hype around AI, and I think overstated claims about how much it will be able to do in the near future. So what we should say to them is, at the moment, AI will help with tasks. It's not going to replace jobs. It will replace some tasks. And I bet a lot of the tasks, like doing in legal case searches or in HR answering repeatedly the same queries, you'd be glad to get shot of those, because we tend to find the more complex cases, the interesting ones as a professional, and that's what AI should be helping us to do primarily.
Excellent. Jillian, did you have anything to add there?
I agree with Sam. Yeah, it's really about the technology today is really about augmenting human intelligence, not replacing it, and it is just freeing us up from those simple but can be quite time-consuming tasks.
Great. So, Jillian, I'm going to keep you on the line with this one. We've got another one. Also from Thomas, considering companies who've never been able to govern their intranet structures well and have poor search, is a chatbot even an option?
Yes. So you could connect your chatbot directly to your current search, but if you're saying that it's not very good, then you're not going to get great responses. But potentially, if we look at how you could, as Sam had talked about, refine that into a multi-tier search, that might help. But what we also have looked at WorkGrid is a way to provide content authors that self-service capability to simply put some answers in, like a bot content management system. So they're able to get off the ground very quickly, because like a lot of when we look at like large policy documents, for example, large PDFs of information, what are the top 10, 20 questions that actually are asked? We've done that exercise with customers, and just using human intelligence, spending a few hours with particular content owners and our self-service capability, they can immediately pre-populate their chatbot, and it works. Or you could connect it directly to your search system. So we offer both approaches, and both have proved valuable.
Interesting. So we've got another question for you here, Jillian. This one's from Allison. She's asking, are there easy ways to collect and analyze data submitted via bots to help with maintenance, content management, and more? And then she has another question, but I'll let you answer that first one first.
Okay. So if I'm understanding that correctly, it ties into what I was saying about whether you're buying it, whether you're building it. The analytics, conversational analytics piece is important. So you need to decide how you're going to track that. And it really is like looking at the utterances, that's the things that people say, looking at the utterances that people are saying, but in a way that respects their privacy. Definitely anonymized, you shouldn't know. But you're using that to then help see how well the bot performed. Did it hit the right intent? Are you seeing that people are asking for something in your company in a way that you weren't expecting? Do people call it by a system, by a name that you never thought of? And all those things will then allow you to improve the bot, and continuously, there's this continuous improvement loop that needs to happen, because you really only get that feedback when real users are using it.
Interesting. So you started actually touching on the other part of her question, which was what is your general thinking about using the data collected to derive insights about users? For example, if you know someone is looking at paternity leave, should you then alert the manager about starting a contract or approval process? So this kind of touches on the privacy that you were just referring to.
I think in that example, I would say no.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, it's the employee, the user is the employee. We're trying to help, in that case, an employee find information about paternity leave. I think once you start down that path of, oh, your employee said this, and notifying somebody else, I definitely think you would have to have some discussions. But different companies have different approaches, if that makes sense. But I would be more, it's for that employee, and that's them asking. And it would be the same as them going to somebody within HR talent and talking to them personally. They would never then phone somebody up, hopefully, and start talking about that. But that's my own opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one final question. This is from Alexis. And Jillian, I'm going to start with you again. And then Sam, if you have anything to add, let me know. Jillian, for internal employee-facing bots, how do you get around issues of security to provide a personalized experience? How do you verify who the person is and what access they have to the information?
So speaking from some of the capabilities we've built within Workgrid, and I know within Liberty Mutual, so we provide like single sign-on. So the chatbot itself is in the same way you would log onto your internet, and then it knows who you are. So you provide single sign-on capabilities using your identity management, existing identity management, and security authentication tools, and you can build that into the chatbot so that when they're in there, then we know who they are, and from that you can build those contextual personalized answers. And sometimes it's just enough to know the default office. Right, you don't need to know everything about the person. Like the default office and their job role could potentially provide a lot of different answers.
Awesome. Sam, I actually lied. I'm not going to give you a chance to answer because we are at the top of the hour.
I agree anyway. Fine.
There you go. That covers it. Thank you to all of you for all of these questions. We will try and follow up with a lot of them after this webinar. And thank you to you, Sam, and to Jillian for speaking, and to Workgrid for sponsoring today's event. The webinar has been recorded, so we will be sending you a link to the on-demand video in the next few business days. And thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.